and welcome to Narayana IAS. I am Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Now students, in today's session, we'll focus on 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So let's have a quick brief about the topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. The first article is taken from Indian Express page number 10. Now in this article, we'll focus on the recent collaboration between India and Singapore in the semiconductors industry. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 10. Now in this article, we'll understand about the phenomena of Naxalism, the ideology of Maoism, the causes behind it, and the steps India has taken. The next article we have taken from Hindu page number 12. Now in this article, we'll understand about vertical fiscal imbalance term. The next article we have taken from Indian Express page number 11. Now in this article, we'll understand about a report of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, which states that the average household spending of the Indians has fallen for the first time less than 50% of the total expenditure, which is a good news. The next article, last, we are taken from Hindu page number 4. Now in this, we'll understand what exactly is Assam Accord. And finally, we'll discuss few practice questions so that you understand the type of questions UPSC may ask in the UPSC examination. So students, let's get started. Students, the title of the first topic is Singapore and Semiconductors, a very important topic. So in this article, we'll understand about the India-Singapore relations and India-Singapore trade relations. Under it, we'll understand about the development of semiconductor industry. You can map this under GS paper 2. A PYQ. With reference to Look East policy of India, consider the following statements. Now, Singapore is a part of Look East policy, and that's the reason understanding this topic becomes extremely important. What is the context? The context is that India has this ambition of developing a very strong domestic semiconductor industry. This is what is India's ambition, and to achieve this, India has collaborated with Singapore, right? Why Singapore? Because Singapore has an expertise in the semiconductor industry. It contributes significantly in the global supply chains. It has expertise in talent development, infrastructure, and industry practices. That's the reason we have collaborated with Singapore. Now let's try to understand the importance of this collaboration. Semiconductor chips, they're very crucial for modern economies. Why? Because right from smartphones to defense equipments, everything we need semiconductor chips. That's the reason development of semiconductor industry is very important. The supply chain disruptions due to COVID-19. Now see, India is dependent on other countries like South Korea, Singapore to get the semiconductor chips. But because of the crisis, like for example the COVID-19, Russia-Ukraine, Israel-Gaza war, the supply chain gets disrupted. And that's the reason the industries that are dependent on the raw material, all the business operation comes to a halt because of the supply chain disruption. That's the reason India wants to be independent, self-sufficient country. That's the reason India's semiconductor mission aims to reduce dependence on the foreign countries. That's the reason we have collaborated with Singapore so that we can develop our own semiconductor industry. Right? And we are going to take advantage of the expertise of Singapore. Now, talking about Singapore's semiconductor expertise, it contributes 10% of the global semiconductor output and holds 5% of global wafer fabrication capacity. What is this fabrication capacity? Now, this wafer fabrication capacity refers to the total production capability of all these semiconductor manufacturing facilities worldwide. What is the purpose? The purpose is to produce silicon wafer. Now students, this silicon wafer is very important. It is a foundational material to develop semiconductor chips. Right? This term, the wafer fabrication capacity, also indicates that how much global demand of these semiconductor chips can be met by the existing production capabilities. I hope you're understanding this point, right? And Singapore started working on the semiconductors in the 1970s. Why? Because Singapore had skilled labor and strong infrastructure. Out of 15, 9 semiconductor industries are based in Singapore. Singapore plays a very important role across the semiconductor value chain, including the IC design, wafer fabrication, assembly as well as testing. The most important point to notice is that semiconductor or Singapore focuses on mature node chips, and these chips are used in the industrial applications rather than the artificial intelligence chips. So this point is very important. It focuses on mature node chips which are used in the industries, right? Now, why is it that India or Singapore wants to collaborate with India? First, because of the rising production cost in Singapore. Now, the wages of the workers in Singapore is high. At the same time, they do not have abundant land. There's limited land. One. Second, increasing offshore of low cost and labor intensive operations. Now, what the companies in Singapore are doing is they are offshoring the work, which means they are producing the semiconductor chips in the countries which has labors cost effective, which means low costing labors, right? Low cost labors. Now, Singapore is also not offering extensive investment incentives. That's the reason no country wants to invest or no company wants to invest in Singapore now. Why? Because they do not offer extensive investment incentives. Now, here India can actually take advantage. Why? Because India's labor costs are comparatively low than Singapore. At the same time, we have abundant land. That's the reason we can leverage this gap. And at the same time, we can also learn from Singapore's expertise in wafer fabrication parks as well as to develop the necessary infrastructure for the development of semiconductor industry. Now, importance of India-Singapore ties. Now, India and Singapore, they share strong economic, strategic and defense partnership, especially under India's Act East policy. Now, what is this Act East policy? This Act East policy, through this Act East policy, India is trying to connect with the Eastern Asian countries as well as the Southeast Asian countries. We are engaging more and more with countries like Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia. Why? Because by engaging with these countries, we are actually trying to prevent China from flexing muscles. We are actually controlling China by working with these countries. And in order to make India's Act East policy a success, Singapore is a very important country, right? And semiconductor partnership is just an extension to the already growing relations between India and Singapore. And then strengthening semiconductor ties with Singapore, it also aligns with India's goal to become a major player in the global technology and electronics sector. And then Singapore can obviously take advantage from India's low cost labor and abundant land. So what is the way forward? One, we have to develop talent in our country. For that, collaborating with Singapore is very important, which we have done. India should partner with Singapore in educational and research programs so that we develop what? Skilled professionals who can work in the semiconductor industry. Second, we have to incentivize investment, which means we have to give certain tax rebates so that we attract the semiconductor companies to invest in our country, right? Third, infrastructure development. Before attracting the companies, we have to provide necessary infrastructure like stable power and continuous water supply, so we attract the top semiconductor companies. And most importantly, India and Singapore can collaborate. Apart from semiconductors, we can also collaborate on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing and advanced chip design. This is how both India and Singapore can leverage their ties making the entire Asian region a peaceful and coordinating one. Right? I hope you understood the entire article. Students, the title of the next topic is Maoist Setback. So we'll understand about the ideology of Maoism and Naxalism. You can map this under GS paper 3 under internal security. Right? This was a PYQ asked in the year 2022. Naxalism is a social, economic and developmental issue, which means Naxalism is a consequence of failure of social, economic and developmental parameters. Right? We'll understand more about this phenomena. See, in 2024, the Indian security forces have made advances in anti-Naxalite operations, which means our security forces have been succeeded in eliminating the hardcore Naxalites. But that doesn't mean that we have completely eliminated the problem of Naxalism. The insurgency continues to still remain, right? Especially in the underdeveloped region. Underdeveloped region, which means poor governance, no electricity, no educational institutions, no healthcare emergency hospitals, no infrastructure, no roads, nothing. These are the regions where the hardcore Naxalites target and attract the poor people, which means the poor people have to face the brunt of the failure of the economic and the social policies. What is Naxalism? Naxalism, also known as left-wing extremism, refers to Maoist insurgent movement which started in the late 1960s, where in the Naxalbari village of West Bengal. Now, this Naxalism, it draws inspiration from Maoist ideology. Mao, who led similar movement in China, right, who fought against the Qing and the Ming dynasty. It advocates protracted people's war against the state, which means the hardcore Naxalite, they encourage the people to fight against the state. Why? Because the hardcore Naxalites believe that the state is not working in the interest of the people. The state is exploiting the resources of the forests. The state is not working for the development of tribal people. That is the reason it is very important that we all unite and fight against the state. This is what is the ideology of Naxalism. They want to uproot the state government and establish their own government. And that's the reason they target the government institutions and infrastructure, especially in the tribal regions. Right? They accuse the state of neglecting the marginalized communities like the tribals and the landlord laborers. In short, the Naxalites feel that the government is not working in the interest of the people. They are exploiting the poor people. They are snatching away the land, and that's the reason all the poor people, that is tribals, have to come together to fight against the state. This is the ideology of Naxalism. And this is what is Naxalism. Now, we'll understand the causes behind Naxalism. The first one is land alienation and displacement, which means the tribal people have been alienated or displaced from their land. For example, the legislation like right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement. Now, this law was actually meant to provide compensation to the people from whom the land was taken. But the tribal people see these laws as exploitative, which means the apprehensions of the tribal people have not been resolved. The lands have been taken from the landless or the tribal people without providing them compensation, which means this is my land, I am the owner of this land, but the government is snatching away my land. I am become a landless person now. The fifth schedule of the Indian Constitution provides special provision for the advancement of the scheduled tribes. But the tribal people say that because of the poor implementation, these protections are not safeguarded by the government authorities. The first problem is the tribal people have been alienated and displaced from their land. The second problem is exploitation of natural resources. Now, the tribal region, they are rich in natural resources. But because of the mining and industrial policies, so the mining companies have actually extracted the natural resources. The tribal people did not get any royalty benefits. And again, the tribals were displaced from their own land. Now, PESA, that is Panchayat extension to scheduled areas, such laws were brought in to give power to the tribal people, so that without the concurrence of tribal people, no development project will be executed. But again, because of poor implementation, which means poor governance, the tribal people got alienated. Then Forest Right Act. The purpose of this act is to give rights to the tribals. But again, because of the poor implementation, such laws were not enforced or practiced in letter and spirit. And what is the end result? The tribal people got more alienated. They did not get any benefits from the government. And the hardcore Naxalites, they brainwashed these people, and these people were made to pick up guns to fight against the state. Next problem is the social and economic inequalities. For example, the tribal people do not have access to basic services like education, healthcare and employment opportunities. And this has led to the overall dissatisfaction, frustration, anger among the tribals. Now, the constitution had actually provided safeguards for the protection or upliftment of the tribal people. We had the 5th schedule, 9th schedule. What does Article 46 say? That promotion of educational and economic interests of scheduled castes. But unfortunately, the benefits have not reached to the tribals because of poor governance. Then, there are also accusations against the security forces that these security forces violate the human rights of the tribal people, which means they use excessive force against the poor tribal people. They use harsh provisions under UAPA and AFSPA against the poor tribal people, which means it is leading to gross human rights violation. These are some of the causes behind the rise of Naxalism in our country. I hope you understood all the causes behind the rise of Naxalism. Now we'll understand the anti-Naxalite operations that the government of India has undertaken to fight against the hardcore Naxalites. First is Operation Green Hunt. All these points you have to mention in the examination if a question comes. This was launched in 2009. The purpose was to eliminate hardcore Naxalites. It involved the CRPF personnel. Now the paramilitary forces and the state police collaborated to fight against the hardcore Naxalites. Second is the very successful Andhra Pradesh Greyhound model. Now this is a state specific incentive or initiative. Here the leadership actually gave incentive to the police officials. The police officials, they worked very effectively. They got the local intelligence from the local people. They got the intelligence and they tackled or completely eliminated the problem of Naxalism in the Andhra Pradesh state and Telangana. The next is the Operation Prahar. Now this is a recent strategy which was undertaken in Chhattisgarh to eliminate the hardcore Naxalites in their stronghold. Now, which is the stronghold of the Naxalites? It is the Bastar Revision in Chhattisgarh. The next is Joint Operations and Intelligence Sharing. Now, there is coordination between the state police and the central forces like the central paramilitary or the CRPF personnel, right? Then the Indian security forces, they are also using technologies like the drones, the satellite mapping and the GPS tracking so as to understand the movement of Naxalites. So these are some of the operations the government of India has undertaken. At the same time, surrender and rehabilitation. So what does Indian government say is that the Indian government, these security forces, give a chance to the hardcore Naxalites. They tell them, you surrender, we will not take any action against you. No matter how many security forces you killed before, we won't take any action against you. You please surrender and we will rehabilitate you, which means we will provide you skills, we will provide you employment. This also is one of the initiatives taken by the Government of India. Now, going future or going further, what are the things that we can do? One, deployment of paramilitary forces like the CRPF. And now the Government of India has made a dedicated force to fight against Naxalites, known by the name Cobra, that is Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. We can focus on deploying similar paramilitary forces and similar dedicated force to fight against Naxalites. Then we also used modern technologies and satellite mapping for getting the intelligence, which means here we have to. So these are the steps the Government of India has taken. We have to strengthen all these initiatives that the Government of India has undertaken. Second is, we have to work on development. Please try to understand one thing. No person picks up guns. He knows that he is going to get killed once he picks up gun, because you cannot be stronger than the state force, right? A person knows that whenever he picks up a gun, he is going to get killed someday or the other, but still he takes the risk. Why? Because he has nothing to lose. There is no development in the region. He has no education, no skills. So he has no role to play in the economy. So here the Government of India should focus on the development of the poor people or the tribals. Now here the Government of India has launched certain schemes like the Integrated Action Plan and the Special Infrastructure Scheme for the development in the Naxal affected regions by building infrastructure, the roads, hospitals, improving communication and creating employment opportunities. These are the points you have to mention in the examination, right? Next is skill development. Very, very important. In the modern economy, providing skill is very, very important, or having skill is very, very important. And that's the reason the Government of India is providing skills under Skill India and Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana to uplift the economically weaker section of the population. Then most importantly, you have to strengthen the governance. All the steps, the constitutional safeguards, the legal measures should be implemented in letter and spirit. The local population, the panchayats has to be strengthened in letter and spirit. We have to make sure that the local government is taking care of the needs of the tribal people, and we have to give them power. Next, Forest Rights Act. It's very important to have the ownership of the land. We all work hard. Why? So that we can buy a house, we can buy a car, which means ownership is what we are actually working for. And that's the reason it is very important that the Government of India has to ensure that they grant forest rights to the tribal people, so that they feel the ownership of the land, they can work on the land and contribute in the economy. So this is how, these are the steps the Government of India has taken, and this is what we need to continue in order to ensure that the hardcore Naxalites are not brainwashing the poor tribal people. So once we focus on the development parameters, human development, economic development, political development, social security, right, we can be very much sure that the Naxal problem will be completely eliminated. The root cause is the failure of government or the government policies. So we have to ensure that we strengthen the governance mechanism. I hope you understood the article, right? Students, the title of the next topic is Vertical Fiscal Imbalance. In this, we'll understand about the Finance Commission and the financial relationship between the union and the states. You can map this under GS paper 2, the federal structure, that is the division of power between the center and the states, and paper 3, that is the government budgeting. PYQ was asked on the recommendations of Finance Commission, right? Now, what is the context? The context is that the union government and states in India have asymmetrical financial relationship. What is asymmetrical? Which is not similar, which is not in proportion, which means that the central government has got more avenues or more opportunities to raise revenue, right, compared to the state government. The union government, the central government has got more resources to raise the revenue compared to the state government. They have more money than the state government. But the expenditure from the states is more than the union government on the state. This is asymmetrical financial relationship. Why? The states incur 61% of the revenue expenditure, but collects only 38% of the revenue receipts. So here, see, what is revenue expenditure? The money the government spends on salaries, right? What is revenue receipts? The revenue the government collects. Let's say, for example, the government is collecting income tax, the GST. This is known as revenue receipts, which means here the expenditure is more than the revenue. And that's the reason the state governments have to depend on the union government. This dependence of the state government on the central government leads to vertical fiscal imbalance, where states have more expenditure responsibilities, which means they have to spend more, but they do not have that money. So they ask the central government to give us money. This is known as vertical fiscal imbalance. It refers to the mismatch between the revenue raising capabilities and expenditure responsibilities. Just now we discussed. In essence, it occurs when the subnational government, that is the local governments or the state governments, are responsible for a larger portion of public spending. Then, to address this imbalance, the central government transfers funds to the state governments. These are of two types. One, the tax devolution, which means a share of taxes collected by the central government is passed on the states, which means income tax is not collected by the states, it is collected by the central government, but it is passed on to the state. One. Second is grants. Now, these are the targeted transfers are provided, right, and based on some conditions, which means, let's say there is a flood in Bihar. Now, Bihar government wants money, the central government gives money, grant. In India, Finance Commission plays a key role in determining how much of the central government's tax revenue should be transferred to states. For example, the central government has collected 1000 rupees in taxes, income tax. Now, of this 1000 rupees, what percentage the central government should give it to the states is something that the Finance Commission will decide, right? And what are the causes for this fiscal imbalance? The centralized tax collection, which means the government of India has got more sources to raise revenue. It is centralized tax collection. States do not have that much power. Second is decentralized spending. Now, here we have already discussed that the state governments have more spending responsibilities on welfare schemes, but they do not have sources to raise revenue. And third is crisis situation, which means during crisis situation like, let's say, the COVID-19. Now, here the local government, the state government was expected to spend more on the public welfare. But again, the problem is they do not have that revenue raising method. That's the reason they have to depend on the central government. And what is the solution? The solution is that we have to make sure that these state governments are financially independent, which means we have to help the state governments to raise the revenue. We have to create certain opportunities through which the state governments can raise the revenue. This is the topic. I hope you understood the topic, right? Students, the title of the next topic is First Time in Modern India, Average Householding Spending on Food Falls to Less Than Half. Very, very important development. So, in this article, we'll understand about the trends in household spending on food, as well as we'll understand about the Economic Advisory Council to the PM. You can map this under GS paper 3 economy as well as prelims. The PYQ. Now, this is a question asked under non-plan expenditure. So, similar such question can also be asked, right? Now, what is the context? The context is that there is a research paper, okay, published by Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. This report highlighted that for the first time after independence, India's average household spending on food has fallen to less than 50% of the overall expenditure. This is such a big development, right? Now, what is this Economic Advisory Council? Let's understand this. This is independent, non-constitutional, non-statutory body. It's neither a constitutional nor a statutory body, and it advises the Prime Minister on economic matters, which means this is an executive body, you can see, right? Non-constitutional, the constitution did not produce this body. Neither this Economic Advisory Council is the result of a law. It is non-statutory. Now, its role is to provide neutral perspectives on issues like inflation, microfinance and industrial output, which means the economic matters. Niti Aayog serves as the nodal agency, very important point for your prelims examination. And this council addresses the macroeconomic concerns when requested by the Prime Minister or independently. And this again is a very important point for your prelims. It publishes reports like the annual economic outlook and the review of the economy. Very important point for your prelims again. I hope you understood about the Economic Advisory Council to the PM. It is an independent body. Now, what are the highlights? One, the household spending on food has dropped to less than 50%, which means initially up to now, let's say I'm earning 100 rupees, I have to spend more than 50 rupees on food. But now, for the first time after independence, this expenditure has fallen less than 50 rupees. The share of expenditure on cereals like the rice and wheat has significantly decreased. Let's understand the reasons. One, because of the government schemes. Government schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana and the National Food Security Act. Now, these actually schemes provide food to the people at a very low rate or free of cost, which means now people do not have to spend money on food. Why? Because these schemes are actually helping the people to get the food. So, there is decline in food expenditure. Second, rising household income. Now, because of the less expenditure on food, the people or the families are spending money on education, healthcare and technology. They are giving education to their children, and their children are actually getting good job in the market and helping the status of the family. Urbanization and economic growth. Now, the urban household, they spend less money on food as a percentage of their income, and they focus more on the services and the lifestyle goods. And last, the agriculture advancements or developments happening in our country. At the same time, the policy of the government to intervene whenever the food prices are going up, which means the staple foods like rice and wheat are very much affordable. And that's the reason the expenditure on food has fallen less than 50% for the first time. A very important development. I hope you have understood about the Economic Advisory Council and the factors behind decline in the household spending on food, right? Students, the title of the next topic is Government to Adopt Recommendations for Protecting Assamese People. Now, in this article, it is very important to understand what is Assam Accord. And this topic is important from GS2 as well as GS3 perspective. So, Assam Accord is something that we study as a part of internal security. But this topic is related to the governance aspect. So, we'll understand one by one. A previous question was asked in the year 2021 on the citizenship. Now, Assam Accord is again related to citizenship. How? We'll understand it. Now, what is the context? The context is that the Assam government has decided to implement 85% of the recommendation of the Justice Biplab Sarma Commission to enforce Clause 6 of the Assam Accord. Don't worry, I'll explain each and everything one by one. Now, what is this Assam Accord? I'll tell you the history of Assam Accord. Assam Accord is a result of the independence of Bangladesh. Bangladesh secured independence in the year 1971, right? Why did Bangladesh secure independence? So, the current Bangladesh was formerly known as East Pakistan, and the current Pakistan is formerly known as West Pakistan. So, the West Pakistanis were torturing and discriminating the people in East Pakistan, that is the current Bangladesh. And this discrimination was happening year after year. And that's the reason now the Bengali speaking Muslims in the current Bangladesh or the former East Pakistan started protesting against the West Pakistanis. And as a result, the West Pakistanis started torturing and killing people. There was a genocide in East Pakistan. The West Pakistanis committed genocide on the people of East Pakistan. And that's the reason lakhs and lakhs of people from East Pakistan, that is the present Bangladesh, flew to India. They came to India. This is known as illegal migration. To save their life, they migrated to India. That was illegal migration. And then because of the illegal migration, the people who entered India or the neighboring states of Bangladesh, that is Assam, these numbers were in lakhs. Lakhs and lakhs of people were entering India. Now, Assam was tensed. Why? Because of the number of increasing illegal migrants. So, the students in Assam were protesting against the rising illegal migrants. And that's the reason finally the government of India had to sign this Assam Accord with the people of Assam, that is the government of Assam, state government of Assam, and these students who were protesting against the rising illegal migrants. And the accord that was signed is known as Assam Accord. We'll understand the provisions now. I hope you understood how the Assam Accord came into being, right? So this is the history which I have just discussed, right? So you can please go through it and understand one by one. I have explained each and everything, right? Now, these are the key provisions of the Assam Accord. The first, so if you just read this, there will be one thing that will be clear. The Assam Accord says that anyone who enters India after 1971 will be deported back to the country they came from. Which means if you enter India after 1971, you will be deported back. This is relating to the citizenship. Right? So, if you come to India before 1971, we will give you citizenship. But after 1971, you will be deported back. You won't be given Indian citizenship. This clause 6 and 7 is very, very important, which we discuss in the context. What is clause 6? Guaranteed constitutional, legal and administrative safeguards to protect the Assamese identity, which means the Assamese people were afraid. Why? Because of the rising illegal migrants. They thought that these illegal migrants would outnumber the people of Assam, which means their culture, their identity was in risk. That's the reason they wanted assurity from the government, and the government of India assured that the identity of the Assamese people will be protected. 1. Clause 6. Clause 7. The government of India also promised that there will be economic development in Assam. How? By establishing oil refinery, paper mill and the Institute of Technology Educational Institution. These are some of the provision that is a part of Assam Accord, and even after so many years, these clauses are not implemented, unfortunately. And now the people of Assam want the government of India to implement clause 6 and clause 7. I hope you understood the article, right? Students, now it's time to discuss few questions so that you understand if you understood all the topics that we have discussed so far, right? So please read the question and try to answer the question by your own. Pause the video. If you have referred or listened to all the 5 topics, trust me, I know that you will be in a position to answer each and every question. So let's start with the first question. Assam Accord often mentioned in news is related to which of the following? This question was also asked in the UPSC examination. A border settlement agreement between Assam and Arunachal? No. A peace agreement between Assam government and the United Liberation Front of Assam? Wrong. An agreement signed between Government of India and leaders of Assam movement addressing the issue of illegal migration. This is what we discussed, right? So it has to be C. I don't have to read even the next option, right? So option is C. Next question, which of the following statements about Singapore's semiconductor industry are correct? Singapore primarily focuses on developing high-end cutting-edge semiconductor chips for no. It does not focus on the artificial intelligence, right? It focuses on certain sectors like the industrial applications. Singapore's success in the semiconductor industry is largely due to its reliance on low-cost labor. No. The labor cost in Singapore is high. At the same time, there is scarcity of land. So this one is also incorrect. Which of the following statements are correct? Neither 1 nor 2 is correct. D. Next question. Which of the following statements is correct about the EAC? It is a constitutional body. No, it is not a it is a non-statutory and independent and provides economic advice to the Prime Minister. Yes, this is correct. The Ministry of Finance serves as the nodal. No, Niti Aayog serves as the nodal agency. Does not publish, it publishes. So, which means option B is the correct answer. Very simple question. Next, consider the following statements with reference to VFI. VFI occurs when subnational governments like the states have more revenue raising powers than expenditure responsibilities. Next, so see, VFI occurs when state governments have more revenue raising powers. No, they do not have revenue raising powers. First is incorrect. Tax devolution and grants from the central government are mechanism used to address. Yes, this is what we exactly discussed. And who decides tax devolution? The Finance Commission. Finance Commission plays a crucial role in determining the extent of tax devolution between. Yes, this one is also correct. So, second and third, which means option B has to be the correct answer for question number 4. Next question, the COBRA unit of India is primarily tasked with which of the following? Coastal defense? No. Counter-terrorism? No. Anti-Naxalite? Yes. This was a dedicated task force that we created to fight against the hardcore Naxalites. See, now means practice question. Now, Naxalism is a social, economic and developmental issue manifesting as a violent internal security threat. In this context, discuss this emerging issues and suggest multi-layered strategy to tackle the menace of Naxalism. First, you have to explain what is Naxalism in the introduction. It is a socio-economic problem. It is a consequence of failure of implementation of certain legal and constitutional safeguards, and this Naxalism phenomena was inspired by the Maoist ideology, and the motto is to capture the state power, right? Then you have to highlight certain issues, social and economic disparities, that is lack of access to basic facilities like education, health, infrastructure, inequality. Then you can also mention about the land alienation, governance deficit, the fifth schedule. Then we have the many laws. Now, these laws are not implemented in letter and spirit, which means is a problem with the governance, human rights violation, right? UAPA, AFSPA, like provisions are used against the poor tribal people. Then the hardcore Naxalites are actually brainwashing the poor tribal people and giving them guns to fight against the state government. So, these are some of the issues. Then what can you do in order to eliminate the problem? One, security measures. You have to deploy paramilitary forces like the Cobra Battalion. Then you have to make sure that you focus on governance, because once you make sure that the tribal region gets developed or becomes developed, no people would pick up guns. So, your focus has to be on governance reforms, that is to develop the tribal regions. Then development initiatives, health, education, etc., or providing skill under the Skill India program. Rehabilitation and reintegration, that is surrender and rehabilitation policy, and then we have to have repeated dialogues with the local people and we have to dissuade them from being a part of the hardcore Naxalite group. This is how you can write the means based answer. I hope since you understood how to write the means based answer. So students, we have completed our DNA session for the day. I hope you understood all the 5 topics that we have discussed as part of today's DNA session. Students, make sure that you are regular with our DNA sessions. Being regular to the DNA sessions to so many topics that we discuss every day, 5 topics a day. So you calculate that for the month, right? In a month, you will have a thorough understanding and knowledge of so many topics, and I'm pretty sure if you are consistent and regular, this will help you in your UPSC examination. So make sure you are continuous, you are consistent, you are regular with the DNA videos. Students, please support us by liking, sharing and subscribing to Narayana IAS Academy. Thank you so much.